Some moments in life pass quietly. No warning, no announcement, just a choice made or not made. And sometimes, years later, all that remains is a question. What if? This is the story of a letter that was written with hope, carried with love, and delivered 20 years too late. In 1999, in a small coastal town, lived a woman named Margaret Hale. She was ordinary in every way that matters. She worked at the local library. She lived alone in a narrow house with creaking floors and windows that rattled in the wind. Margaret believed in routine. Morning tea at exactly 7. The same walk to work. The same seat at the same cafe every Friday afternoon. People often confuse routine with safety, but routine can also be a way to hide. 20 years earlier, Margaret had been someone else. She had been young, restless, in love. His name was Daniel. They met when they were barely adults, too young to understand how fragile time really is. Daniel was ambitious and patient, always talking about leaving town, about seeing the world beyond the shoreline. Margaret was different. She loved stillness, familiar streets, the comfort of knowing where life would take her next. They loved each other deeply, but in different directions. When Daniel told her he was leaving, just for a while, he said Margaret smiled and told him she understood. She didn't tell him she was afraid. She didn't tell him she wished he would stay. She didn't tell him that sometimes love needs words, not silence. He promised he would write. She promised she would wait. They both believed promises were stronger than distance. Daniel left that summer. Weeks passed, then months. Margaret checked the mailbox every afternoon, pretending she wasn't hoping. Nothing came. She told herself he was busy. She told herself patience was love. She told herself silence didn't mean goodbye. Eventually, she stopped checking the mailbox so often. What Margaret never knew was that Daniel did write. Not once, not twice, but many times. The first letter was written only weeks after he left. In it, Daniel wrote about loneliness, about how the city felt colder without her, about how every plan he made felt empty if she wasn't part of it. He asked her to come. He mailed the letter, and it never arrived. The second letter came months later. This one was longer, more vulnerable. He admitted fear, regret, the growing suspicion that leaving had been a mistake. He asked again. No response came. By the third letter, doubt had replaced hope. Daniel wondered if Margaret had moved on, if her silence was an answer in itself. He wrote anyway, because some feelings refused to stay quiet. That letter never arrived either. Years passed. Daniel eventually stopped writing. Margaret eventually stopped waiting. Life, as it always does, filled the space between what was and what could have been. Daniel married. Margaret did not. Daniel moved cities. Margaret stayed. They lived separate lives, shaped by the same unanswered silence. In 2019, Margaret retired. Her routine changed for the first time in decades. One quiet afternoon, she decided to clean the attic, a place she had avoided for years. Dust-covered boxes, old photographs, forgotten memories. In the far corner, behind a loose wooden panel, she noticed something strange. A narrow gap, and inside it, a bundle of envelopes. Yellowed, unopened, addressed in handwriting she recognized instantly. Her hands trembled as she picked them up. They were postmarked from 1999, her name written carefully on every single one. Margaret sat on the attic floor and opened the first letter, and then the second, and then the third. Each word felt like it had been waiting for her. Each sentence landed with a weight of 20 years. Daniel had loved her. Daniel had waited. Daniel had asked her to come, and she never knew. She wept, not loudly, not dramatically, but the quiet way people cry when they realize something cannot be fixed. Not because the love was gone, but because the time was. Margaret spent the next days reading the letters again and again. She noticed how the handwriting changed, hopeful at first, then uncertain, then resigned. She saw the moment Daniel had let go, the exact point where a life might have turned, but didn't. She wondered who she would have been if she had known. She wondered who Daniel had become. After weeks of hesitation, Margaret did something she had never done before. She searched for him. It wasn't easy. Time hides people well. But eventually, she found an address. She wrote a letter of her own, not to ask for anything, not to change the past, just to tell the truth. She wrote about the letters, about the attic, about the silence that wasn't silence at all. She apologized, not for what she did, but for what she never had the chance to do. She ended the letter simply. I would have come. Daniel received the letter on an ordinary Tuesday. He was older now, grayer, softer. He read it slowly. Then he read it again. And then he sat in silence for a long time. He didn't cry. Some emotions arrived too late for tears. Daniel wrote back, not with anger, not with regret, but with understanding. He told her he had lived a full life, that he was happy in his own way, that the past no longer hurt the way it once had. But he also wrote this. There are some moments that never stop echoing. They exchanged letters for a while. Carefully, gently. No promises. No rewriting history. Just two people finally speaking the words that time had delayed. They never met again. They didn't need to. The letters had already done what they were meant to do. They closed a door that had been left open for 20 years. And here is the lesson that lingers. Silence is not neutral. Unspoken words don't disappear. They wait, sometimes for days, sometimes for decades, and sometimes they arrive too late. Echoes of Reality asks, how many letters are we leaving unwritten? How many words are we assuming will still matter tomorrow? Time does not pause for certainty. And love, real love, needs courage, not quiet. This was Echoes of Reality, and this was the story of a letter that waited 20 years to be read.